Hello, welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris. Comic book publishers have been formed for a wide variety of reasons: to cash in on a trend, to share independent work with people, or maybe to import foreign work to a new audience. But what about a time when a publisher was formed out of spite? That's what I want to talk about today. I'm talking about Atlas Comics, which was formed to spite Marvel Comics and utterly failed. And now, just recently, a movie producer has talked about how he wants to revive the superheroes from this failed experiment and create a shared cinematic universe. It's likely doomed to the same failure that the half-a-year experiment that was Atlas Comics was doomed to. So that's what I want to talk about today. I'm going to talk to you about the history of Atlas, as well as share with you one of their comics, Tiger Man, so that you can understand just how bad things were. This past week at Cannes Film Festival, producer Steve and Paul broke some comic book related news. Paul produced the Ghost Rider movies, as well as classics like Baby Geniuses 2, Super Babies. Paul announced that he purchased the film rights to characters from Atlas, with plans to have movies distributed by Paramount beginning in 2021. Paul spoke about how they intend to build a cinematic universe to compete with Marvel. He spoke about how many characters he got, saying, "We're still counting the characters. Marvel has 4,700. I want to be up there." You're trying to count them up? Well, let me help. Atlas published 23 total issues. So, combined, maybe you have like 24 characters. You're never going to get close to Marvel. Let me explain. There are two versions of Atlas, and they share some DNA. But the Atlas that this movie producer is talking about is also known as Atlas Seaboard because its parent company was called Seaboard Publishing. And Atlas that he's talking about was formed in the 70s. Now, there was a previous Atlas Comics that was something that eventually turned into Marvel Comics. And that was in the 50s. There was Timely, which morphed into Atlas, which morphed into Marvel Comics. All the same overall company. So they do share some DNA, actually, because both versions of Atlas were run by a guy named Martin Goodman. Martin Goodman was the publisher who founded Timely Comics in 1939, publishing Marvel Comics #1, featuring Namor the Submariner and the original Human Torch. While Timely chased the trend of publishing superhero stories, by the 50s, superheroes weren't very popular, and Timely became Atlas, publishing sci-fi stories. It was 1961 when Atlas became Marvel, and Goodman directed Stan Lee to come up with a superhero team to capitalize on the popularity of competitor DC Comics' Justice League. In 1968, Goodman sold his publishing company to the Perfect Film and Chemical Corporation, but remained on in the role of publisher until retiring in 1972. He intended for his son, Charles "Chip" Goodman, to take over, but ownership felt Stan Lee was the better choice. And this is where Goodman felt slighted. He had intended to build his publishing empire and hand it over to his son Chip, but ownership wasn't comfortable because Chip hadn't really accomplished anything in publishing, whereas Stan Lee had created tons of beloved characters and worked as an editor, so they felt that he was the better choice for publisher. So Goodman, it's speculation when I say that he wanted to have his son installed and that's why he got offended. It just seems likely when we look at the history. There's also every chance that he wanted to prove that Marvel Comics was successful because of him and that he could do it again. So if that was the case, unfortunately, he crashed and burned because Atlas Seaboard in the 70s, when he formed it in 1974, it didn't even last a year. Goodman placed his son Chip in charge, and with Chip running the show, some strange decisions were made. Editors Jeff Rovin and Larry Lieber, Stan Lee's brother, were hired. Jeff had a background in black and white horror comics at Warren Publishing, but was placed in charge of the superhero books. Meanwhile, Larry had worked on superhero stories at Marvel, and he was placed in charge of Atlas's new black and white magazines. These two editors were placed in the opposite roles, which would make sense. Meanwhile, Chip mostly focused on the adult magazines the parent company Seaboard published. None of the comics lasted for more than 4 issues, and almost all of them shifted their direction wildly after 2 issues. Scorpion went from a mercenary to a spandex superhero. Morlock 2001 killed off its title character and introduced a brand new team. Some of Atlas's initial decisions were smart. They offered the best page rates in the business, as well as allowed their artists to retain their physical artwork. This attracted some top-tier talent, including Neal Adams, Steve Ditko, Wally Wood, Howard Chaykin, Alex Toth, and more. Some of the creators also retained the rights to their creations. Howard Chaykin brought Scorpion to Marvel as Dominic Fortune. Rich Buckler brought Demon Hunter to Marvel as Devil Slayer. So Atlas did have steps forward for creators' rights, but their main goal was to draw talent from Marvel and DC, and mostly they didn't accomplish that. Artists and writers working for Marvel or DC knew that loyalty was important to getting ongoing work, so only a few big names or people that didn't regularly work at the big two went over to Atlas. But it was clear that the Goodmans were just trying to be Marvel. Examples include just looking at the name of the publisher, Atlas, just like the 50s company that became Marvel, or their ads. The ads said they were the new House of Ideas, which was a clear riff on Marvel's slogan, and their characters were very similar to Marvel's ideas. Instead of the Hulk and Conan, Atlas offered the Brute and Wolf the Barbarian, or Ironjaw the Barbarian. They knocked off DC as well with a Swamp Thing-esque monster, and Warren's Vampirella with Devilina. The important thing to note here is that while the high page rates did attract some top-tier artistic talent, they weren't especially invested in the product, because overall, Atlas wasn't trying to create comic books that interested the creators themselves. They were trying to duplicate the shared universe that DC and Marvel had spent decades getting to. They wanted to do that overnight, and the editors were giving poor advice and changing direction radically after issue 2 of pretty much every series. So the actual output was very inconsistent. Creative teams switched really quickly. The direction of the book changed really quickly. I think a great example of the inconsistent work is taking a look at one of their creations, Tiger Man #1. Tiger Man #1 was the first of only 3 issues of the title. Issue 1 is written by Gabriel Levi, who wrote 10 issues of various titles for Atlas and nothing else. Ernie Colin is the artist, and he worked on lots of stuff at DC and Marvel. My personal favorite was Damage Control, about a company that rebuilt after superheroes destroyed cities. Colin is a solid artist, good at facial expressions. He's inconsistent on this title, and his heart clearly isn't in it because he left after the first issue. The cover doesn't inspire much confidence. Tiger Man is awkwardly hunched over a lady, and his tiger mask makes him look very sad. Meanwhile, 2 men of average build, one of them balding, hang out and tell him that they killed his sister. "Yeah, Tiger Man, we killed your sister, so what?" And right under that exclamation, a sad-looking Tiger Man. The story begins with a nurse returning to her apartment only to be assaulted by 2 men. You can tell they're up to no good because the guy in the red shirt has both a skull and crossbones patch and a swastika on his arm. That's double bad news. The artwork and layout isn't bad at all, but the lettering is terrible. It's a dull, flat, typed font with none of the personality hand-drawn lettering carries. The pirate-looking bad guy holds a knife to the woman, and the situation seems hopeless until everyone is distracted. On the next page, Tiger Man leaps in. He quickly disarms the knife-wielding attacker and stands over him. He doesn't look intimidating at all because the colorist forgot to color his arm and leg tights blue, so it looks like he's running around in a bathing suit or some sort of romper. The second criminal also pulls a knife on the nurse, but in the next panel, Tiger Man is crushing his face. He's just that fast. We'll get back to Tiger Man's depressing mask in a little bit, but what I want to talk about is the fact that Tiger Man is just so obviously a knockoff of what Marvel was doing at the time. He really comes across as somebody like Black Panther, and I think that they just went with an animal-themed hero that happened to be Tiger Man because by default, tigers hadn't been used yet. Speaking of knockoffs, every time we come across some sort of element, I'm going to try a knockoff of my favorite soda, Mountain Dew. So that's good. So the first knockoff soda I want to try to honor looking at knockoff elements of Tiger Man is Mountain Breeze, which I believe comes from Walmart. Let's see if this tastes at all like Mountain Dew. It just tastes less sweet. It tastes a little more orangey. All right, moving on. After being saved, the nurse says the city is more like a jungle, which is just the word Tiger Man was hoping to hear because it allows him to remember how his whole story started in the jungle. We cut to the jungles of Africa, specifically the heart of Zambia. Zambia is towards the southern end of Africa, a landlocked nation that was ruled by the British as Rhodesia until the mid-1960s. So they were a relatively newly independent nation when the comic book came out in 1975. The intro page talks about a villager escaping a lion while showing images of what are either cheetahs or leopards. He's being helped by Dr. Hill, who we soon learn is an American doctor helping the people of Zambia. Dr. Hill is fascinated by the local animals, who he thinks sense danger. We then immediately cut to a scene where the village has captured a tiger said to have come from India. And thank goodness the story at least acknowledged the fact that tigers come from India, because tigers are not native to Africa, where this story is set. It's pretty ridiculous that a very small remote village would have transported a tiger there, but I guess the writer just felt the need to force it in because he both wanted to create Tiger Man and have some sort of an African origin story for his white protagonist, kind of like Tarzan. But that's kind of ridiculous. They should have either set the whole story in India, where this would have made sense, or maybe just made the guy Lion Man. It makes no sense. Dr. Hill then seems to put his responsibilities of helping the local people aside and draws blood from the tiger. He runs a bunch of undefined experiments until proclaiming, "I've done it! I've isolated the chromosome that makes this creature so powerful!" The story then introduces a quick subplot of the local tribal doctor expressing his jealousy of Dr. Hill. One random guy doesn't seem to help things by pointing at him and going, "His medicine is better than yours." Real sensitive. Meanwhile, Dr. Hill thinks about how he'd love to inject a human with the tiger's chromosome, but that it'd cost him his license. Then he just decides to inject the tiger blood in himself.
Because I'm me, I'm different. I just have a different constitution, I have a different brain, I have a different heart, I have a different, I get tiger blood, man. Winning.
I can actually buy into the superhero logic of a doctor isolating some DNA from a tiger and wanting to give those powers to a human being. But the pacing on this story is garbage because it just happens over a couple panels. The doctor just has a little bit of blood and seemingly on a whim decides to inject it in himself. Now, when you compare that to the origins of various Marvel superheroes, yeah, they got their powers from various scientific experiments, but it's often a science experiment that went awry. Bruce Banner got blasted by gamma radiation after saving somebody else's life. He wasn't meant to get blasted by that gamma radiation. Peter Parker got bitten by a radioactive spider, but that was an accident, and seemingly out of the blue, that gifts them powers. But Dr. Hill is doing it to himself, and for no real apparent reason. He's just like, well, let's just see what happens, dude. So that's a weird knockoff. So this time I'm going to try Citrus Drop, which is a Mountain Dew knockoff that comes from the Safeway chain of grocery stores. Let's see. Much more carbonated, kind of bland, not a lot of flavor, just generally sweet. No, this one isn't as good as Mountain Dew. And Atlas's Tarantula isn't as good as Marvel's Spider-Man. The jealous tribal doctor unlocks the tiger and thinks to himself how everyone will blame Dr. Hill for keeping it there, which doesn't make much sense since another doctor seemed to introduce Dr. Hill to the tiger. But let's just skip past that. Dr. Hill steps out of his office and wonders if he changed at all. He instantly bumps into the tiger, punches its face in, and mauls it. Yup, he's got superpowers. The story then jumps forward 2 years, and we're told Dr. Hill has wrapped up his internship. That's an intense internship. He gets ready to head back to America, and the local chief gives him a little tiger bodysuit that the people sewed out of the old tiger carcass as a gift to him. Dr. Hill makes it back home to New York City through what we're told are countless in-flight movies, transfers, and delays. Sounds terrible. But he greets his sister Anna, who calls Dr. Hill Lanny. It took us 7 pages to learn that the main character's name is Lanny, which is actually just a nickname for Lan. That's his name, Lan, which is basically an old German and English name that means renowned land. Combined with the fact that his last name is Hill, maybe this means that they were giving him a name that had to do with nature, or maybe I'm giving this way more thought than the writer did. I don't know. Anna and Lan have a conversation in the car on the way to their apartments. Anna is apparently a Broadway actress. She drops Lan off, returns home, and 2 men are hanging out in her apartment. They say they caught her matinee and assume she's rich. So these may be criminals, but they're cultured criminals who take time to see the theater from time to time. One of the men grabs the hair from one of Anna's 3 faces. We cut to Lan getting a call from the police that something's happened to Anna, and when he arrives, the police detective lets Lan know that her dying words were about a bald man. This detective believes in sharing clues, which is nice, but he should probably have considered that Lan was the last person to see Anna alive. Regardless, Lan picks up some crime scene evidence and takes a big whiff in front of the police, thinking to himself how it smells like horses. It's a clue! Lan walks home and is 100% convinced the city is too big, so the police will never solve a murder. So he goes home and takes out the clothes that he got from Africa. Apparently, this also included a sad tiger face mask and some gloves with claws. That's fortunate because he throws them on and says it was his destiny to use his tiger powers. Tiger Man kneels delicately on the edge of a rooftop and wonders where you can find horses in New York City. He heads by a riding academy and the police stables, but isn't able to identify the right scent. Fortunately, he comes across a flyer for a rodeo. Tiger Man sneaks into the rodeo, which is apparently going on in the middle of the night. He's frustrated because none of the cowboys are bald. But then the announcer points out that Skinhead Jake lost his hat, but is doing great at riding a bronco. Yes, this man named himself Skinhead Jake, which is a bad decision, but he's obviously pretty bad at making decisions because generally a rodeo rider earns a decent living and doesn't need to mug Broadway actresses. Tiger Man heads to the employee exit with the plan of ripping Jake to shreds, but thinks about how while he senses Jake was involved, the scent isn't right. Jake must have a partner. So Tiger Man follows Jake, who meets another guy with a cowboy hat, and they head into a bar full of men in cowboy hats. Tiger Man is getting very excited about the idea of killing them. Tiger Man doesn't break through a window or kick open a door, he just quietly walks in, takes a seat at the bar, and orders milk to catch everyone's attention. In later issues, he gets even stronger if he drinks Tiger's milk. Gross! Let's see if it's as gross as Mountain Lightning, which is the dollar store version of Mountain Dew. This will probably be the last one I try today. Let's see. That just tastes weirdly artificial. It tastes very, very sweet. It does not really taste like Mountain Dew. But it's not bad. The criminals make fun of Tiger Man, asking if he made the suit himself. No, he didn't. The men haven't heard Tiger Man say anything, but they break a glass bottle and get ready to attack him. He then leaps across the bar, tackling them. He delivers a short monologue while he sails through the air, talking about how they killed a woman. A bouncer tries to subdue Tiger Man, but is thrown against a wall very easily. The next page shows a very awkward fight scene that mostly seems to involve Tiger Man facing away from his enemies and flailing around behind himself with his claws. It seems to work though, and he bashes the men around and then just leaves. Tiger Man then jumps around some buildings, thinking to himself how that really wasn't very satisfying, but that now he'll prevent other crimes so that no one else has to go through the pain of losing someone close to them like he did with his sister Anna. And apparently the tiger mask reacts to Lan Hill's mouth, because sometimes it's open and sometimes it's closed. The final panel has Tiger Man shouting that evil should beware Tiger Man, and he says his name without a hyphen, even though the cover indicates his name should be spelled with a hyphen. Does this mean that Tiger Man doesn't know his own name? Or is it more likely that the creators just weren't paying close attention to their own work? I think it might be that latter one, because this creative team is gone by the second issue. And that was typical of a lot of Atlas Seaboard titles. The company really only was around for about half a year. None of their titles made it past 4 issues. And none of them are that great. But the artwork actually isn't too bad. So collecting them can actually be a little bit of fun because there's not that many titles to collect. The artwork is generally pretty good, and it was like formed out of spite back then, but is kind of humorous now. It's not very good, so it's kind of funny to read them now. So actually, I do think that some fun can be found out of that in terms of collecting. But anyway, that's fun. Speaking of fun, let's take a quick look at what fan art came in this week. Pekka and Lasse from Finland created this amazing piece. That's me as Shazam villain Mr. Mind in a Rob Liefeld style. Crew Newcomer returns. He says this artwork, featuring Cosmic Chris about to eat Moon Knight for a midnight snack, was inspired by Jack Kirby artwork. Darby Power illustrated my house getting squashed by Godzilla. I would be honored. Grimlock sent in a piece of art that features me doing my best Hugh Jackman impression. Hi Fam has envisioned what's just beyond my set. Folks, take a look at the amazing details of the Comic Tropes Cave. From Costa Rica, Christopher Gonzalez sent in a great illustration of a mashup between me and Cerebus. You can see more of Christopher's work on his Instagram. Samuel Fonseca from Brazil sent in this great piece featuring well-known drinkers staging an intervention for me. Samuel is in the process of illustrating a graphic novel. If you would like to have artwork featured on this channel, as long as it has something directly to do with comic tropes, I'm happy to share it. Just send it to this address, comictropes@gmail.com. I'll feature it, and then I enter everybody that entered in a chance to win a Gachapon prize that I picked up in Japan. Comes out of the Gachaponi machine that was donated by Lunar Shine Store. Samuel said that he would decline to be in the running for the prize, so I've got 6 numbers here. I'm just going to drop them in and randomly draw a winner. Thank you to all my international viewers. This is so exciting to get art from international people. It's always a thrill. I'm really grateful. All right, so that's number 3. Let me pull back up my script here and see who number 3 was. Number 3 is Darby Power. So Darby, let me get your contact information and I will send you a Gachapon. Let's see which one it is. All right. Folks, after this, I'm down to 2 Gachapon, and then I'm going to take a short break. Oh, it's some sort of Pokeball. I'm not 100% sure what's inside, but some sort of Pokeball. So thank you very much to everybody that sent in fan art. Thank you to all of my viewers for hitting like and subscribe. I sincerely appreciate that. Thank you so much to my patrons. Without you guys, I really couldn't be doing what I do. That really helps. If you'd like to support this show, I do have both a Patreon account where we've got rewards for tiers as low as $1, and I've got a Ko-fi account if you wanted to do simply a one-time donation. Whatever you can do, I sincerely appreciate, and seriously, don't feel any obligation. Just watching is more than enough. All right, next week, I'm coming back with something very modern. I'm going to talk about what I think is the best superhero book on the stands today. I'll let you mull that one over. Let me know what you think about Atlas Seaboard in the comments below. And until next time, keep reading comics.